Perfect. Welcome everybody to this event. I'm glad you can hear us. You guys, if you have questions, please feel free to type into the chat box or the Q&A. So this is the session on resilience and renovation. We've got 3 excellent speakers today, and I will just share a quick intro slide as we're getting started here. And you'll have to excuse me. Clearly, I'm very, very new to using Hopin. So I'm Jessie Glicker from Buildings Performance Institute Europe. I'll be moderating our session today. And so we have our 3 speakers, Anders Hall, Lois Mulas, excuse my mispronunciation of a lot of names, and Blanca Kovac-Waletis.
Waletis, yes.
Waletis, perfect. And we'll have 3 different presentations, and we'll hear about building renovation and resiliency, how these things can go together, where there are synergies, and we'll have 3 very different sort of angles. And so I think it'll be a very interesting discussion. We'll hear from our 3 speakers first with a couple of follow-up questions individually, and then we'll hopefully have time for Q&A. So please feel free, as the presenters are speaking, to write into the chat box. I'll monitor the chat box so that our speakers don't need to worry about that, and we can go from there. So I think we can get started. Anders, I will turn it over to you, and if you would like to share your screen.
And I share that one. We'll go into presentation. Okay. Right. So thank you for attending this breakout session. I'm Anders Hall. I'm the president of the European Solar Shading Organization, and connecting quite recently with Stephen and the World Green Building Council. I think we haven't been participating in this project that is actually closing via the session today, but we hope that it's a kickstart for us to get engaged from here on. So today I would like to share some insights on how dynamic solar shading can be a strong contributor for future sustainability in the building stock, and in particular actually when it comes to the complicated issues around renovation. So let's see if we can. There. So most of us probably already know that the skin is the largest organ of our body, and it's quite an amazing organ. It adapts to the environment. So when it's very cold, it shuts down. When it's very hot, it opens up. You start sweating. So it's doing everything it can to protect your inner organs and keep you safe and healthy. And we are delicate creatures. Somebody told me recently that a naked person in, I think it was below 10 degrees outside, will be dead in less than 30 minutes. So, but then we draw this parallel from the human body over to buildings. This is what I see everywhere in the world when I travel and on my different activities. There has been an effort to solve all the skin issues of a building by specifying quite heavy glazing, etc. And then when people move in, you see it doesn't work. So the tenants, they add their own glare protection, etc. To be able even to exist and work properly in these buildings. And what's important to realize here is that a square meter of a facade, in average, this calculation was done in New Delhi by a sustainability guy I know very well, but I think it's adoptable also for the Northern Hemisphere in Europe, because we have low sun here. 1 square meter of a facade is exposed to the equivalent amount of energy during 1 year that it takes to make 40,000 cups of coffee or boiling 30,000 eggs for breakfast. And knowing from Glass for Europe a couple of years ago, when they told us as an organization that An approximation is that 85% of all existing windows in Europe are either single or double clear glazing with no energy performance built in whatsoever. So that means that a lot of this energy will enter the buildings, and then we need mechanical applications running on electricity to remove that overheating temperature so we can thrive and live a healthy life inside or work properly. And this goes then in parallel with reports like this one from International Energy Agency, where the development of energy consumption, electricity consumption on cooling alone would scare most of us. And we are looking forward towards this kind of development when we are at the same time looking to go more electric on transport, on cars, and all kinds of things. So it is a challenge, and therefore I would like to market the thinking around dynamic or automated solar shading, which is regarded as a passive solution. It's an active product or solution, but it's a passive solution that will be dynamic and adapt itself to the circumstances, because it's not only heat waves, it's also cold periods during winters, etc., where solar shading actually can play a significant role in terms of insulation. We can manage the overheating problems that we see more frequent during recent time. People are dying. We can read scary reports about that. And minimize energy consumption. That's coming back again to the mechanical installations we need to condition the indoor environment. Doesn't have to run so much. Lower heat island effects, in the sense that when cooling equipment, for example, is running, we get cooler inside, but we let out a lot of heat on the outside. And that will then be adding to the heat island effects in our urban areas. Minimize glare and other health things. Allow for larger windows equals more daylight. We have a new daylight norm now, EN 17037, that stipulates the importance of view to the outside, that we should or must be exposed to daylight every day. But at the same time, where I come from, I see a tendency that windows in many buildings are shrinking because of the heating problem. So the easy way out is to make windows smaller, but that will have negative side effects as well. Here we have a case study, a renovation of an old factory building into small luxury condominiums or apartments, where a poorly specified glass was chosen, and it was all simulated. They were told, the developer was told that it will never be above 27 degrees on this west facade in these apartments. But reality turned out to be 47.5, which is like Death Valley in the US kind of temperature. We as an industry got involved locally, and together with South Bank University, there was, let's say, a live study during a couple of months. And this was in September in 2016. And we saw that with external solar shading, we could bring down the temperature to 29 degrees roughly, and with internal solar shading to 34. Still not properly livable temperature, but a significant improvement. So had we been there early in this, in the planning phase of this, with the right kind of glass, these apartments would have been fully livable from the start. This study was recognized by the UK Climate Change Committee, which you can download and read, quite accessible reading. I just cherry-picked where they said in one of their conclusions that increasing heat is major climate risk to health. Shading in winter as well as summer remains urgently needed. So our industry and the contribution we can give in this aspect has been recognized on high level. So we are a part of a solution. I would never advocate that we are the solution. I mean, the proper solution for the sustainability resilience that we all are looking for comes from the combination and the cooperation between different industries. And I think it slightly demands a different breed of consultants and planners in the future. We see some already, but we need more. Solar shading in terms of renovation is a very cost-efficient addition you can bring to already existing buildings before you start doing heavy big things to all the windows or all the complete facades or ceilings. Take a look at it. It is significant, and many people are surprised. And we have, as an industry, several projects around the world where we've been in contact with architects, planners, consultants that gained the insights around this years ago. So we see London here, we see Sydney, Oslo, Gothenburg, all kinds of places where it's documented that it really works. The wooden tower on the right side, for example, it's a big project in Sydney with wood blinds, which is crazy as such, budget-wise. But thanks to the solar shading, they could cut the number of chilled beams in the cooling system with 50%. A massive savings, for example, massive saving. The one in the middle top is a Gothenburg office with 65% glazed area, running on 42 kilowatt hours per square meter year. And it works, but they all have dynamic shading. So, brief introduction, and my slogan always is the best kilowatt hour is always the one we don't need. And I also welcome you to follow our organization. We just 6 months ago initiated a LinkedIn where we will share knowledge and insights as we go into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Very interesting insights for sure. And I think you raised a couple of very important points. We're very quick to jump to these technological solutions in terms of cooling. And you mentioned the Future of Cooling report as really the world is heating up and thinking about how we can use these passive solutions first to reduce, or in combination with renovations, to really reduce how much we need to supply in terms of cooling, in terms of the other solutions we're putting into a building. And I think also often people hear the word solar and they immediately start thinking of solar panels, solar energy, and not necessarily solar cooling. So I think it's an important reminder, and that it often gets overlooked in terms of building renovations.
Yeah.
So a question that I have for you is tying it into the Build Upon Squared framework. So the framework is designed to help cities better monitor renovation impacts. So could a better understanding of the benefits of addressing overheating risk help increase renovation rates?
Absolutely. And I mean, for us in the scope of what this project intends to do, I mean, the first fight for me as the president of the shading industry is to gain recognition, that people realize that it's there and it works. Mm-hmm. Then comes there are some legal practical problems also, mm-hmm. As hurdles, because even if buildings are designed, etc., with the best intentions, there is this construction phase and all that with the procurement, mm-hmm. where there is also very often a big lack of understanding, mm-hmm. of why this is specified this way, etc. Then there is the legal aspect of who is the owner of the shading. Okay. It is not a natural part of a facade, for example. So does it belong to the tenants occupying the building, or does it belong to the building owner? Sure. And we are struggling with these things, but I hope that by appearing and bringing this up on this level, that we can gain the recognition that we need, because the contribution from shading is significant. The potential is significant.
Sure. And so we do have some questions in the chat box, or some commentary in the chat box. So one of the questions I think that's an important one is there often a local override to help sort of combat, to make sure that occupants have that ability to go in and change anything that's happening?
Yeah. I mean, very often shading I've been working with commercial buildings for the past 25 years, which means that we deal with a lot of people on the user side. And it's an absolute experience that, yes, you need to have control systems running it, because we are all the same. We are lazy. We don't proactively do things. So we need a system to do it for us, but then we also have different wishes and needs. So you need to combine the overall system with local override possibilities.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And we'll continue to take questions for Anders after we've heard from all 3 presenters. So thank you for now, and we will certainly come back to you. And for right now, I'd like to pass over the presentation to Lois. Lewis, maybe, is that the proper pronunciation for your presentation?
Yes, it is. It is Lois Moulas.
Perfect.
You pronounce it very well.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. And over to you now, and to share your slides.
Okay. I will proceed. I'm trying, but the button doesn't work.
Do you have the small screen at the bottom
Yes.
with the red line?
Exactly, and when I click on it, it doesn't work. So,
okay, hold on. I have your slides, so I will present your slides.
Thanks.
No problem.
It was, well. So I will tell you which slides to go through.
Yes, perfect.
It'll be easy.
All right, one moment. Sorry, everybody, for the slight delay.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. Well, hello. So I'm Lois Moulas, the General Director of OID. Please excuse me for my French accent. OID is a non-profit organization, about 100 real estate players focusing on leveling up their ESG practices. So we empower ESG issues for the real estate players with tools, normative and technical watch, and experience sharings, mainly in France until now. Nevertheless, we are launching a new European program thanks to the support of several French sponsors and European partners. So the main issues we focused on are energy, climate change, biodiversity, sustainable finance, and adaptation to climate change. So you can go straight to the slide 3, please. Okay. So how climate change impact buildings? It impacts it at different level, at least in France, and mainly in France, with heat waves and high temperatures. Can go to the next slide. Droughts and expansion. Next slide. Floods. Next. Marine submersion. And also fires and storms. So you can go to the slide. Next one. That's why we developed several tools in order to accompany real estate to measure physical risk, to set climate risk strategies, and to set normative requirements, improving its operational practices. Among them, BatAdapt, this tool, is a climate risk mapping tool that enables anybody to know what is its physical risk due to climate change in France. to measure the level of risk on its asset. It is an open source tool and free tool, as we are a non-profit organization for the general interest. You can go to the next slide so I can show example. For instance, if you fill in an address, you can get a level of risk on your buildings regarding to the 5 main hazards that I was explaining before. And you can also get to the next, please, slide, to adaptation actions. So everything here from this platform is linked to our adaptation action guide. Next, please. That presents more than 40 actions to adapt its building to climate change. We can easily say that adaptation and renovation are duly linked. We organize this guide by the different hazards and by category of actions. Most of them can be implemented during a refurbishment. Indeed, there are overlaps between action to climate change, action for the thermical renovation, and refurbishment. If you go to the next slide, you can find here the different action we listed, and we provide experience study case on, such as structure, components and materials, network services and infrastructure, etc., etc. If you move on, sorry, so this doesn't work on your computer. So I pointed out what are the actions that can be done during refurbishment. At the end, we can see that there are actions mainly on working on heat waves, and also actions of vegetalization, such as improving the insulation and inercy of opaque walls. We were speaking about solar shadings before, passive solar shadings, but there are also a lot of action about vegetalization. Most of this action focused on adapting to heat wave, and you can find these case studies on our platform that is called Taroen, not yet translated English, unfortunately. But what I wanted to say regarding to the last IPCC conclusions, for the scenario business as usual, we will be above 2.5 degrees in 2050 or nearly. And the average rhythm of refurbishments is about 25 years. Means that we are already in 2046, almost 2047. So to conclude, any refurbishment should be an opportunity to adapt the building, since now, at least on heat waves issues. You can move to the next slide, which is an illustration that you can find in this guide. Then we can follow. Sorry, next slide. Next. Yes, so we can follow. I wanted to speak also about this guide. We have been working with the GABC, Global Alliance for Building and Construction, since 2018 to write an international guide to policymakers on building and adaptation to climate change, which is called Call for Action. And what we do at our level is to try for the French market until now to provide different tools that helps real estate players to onboard adaptation to climate change in their strategies. So I was speaking about BATADAP, the physical risk mapping tool, but we also produced due diligence grids such as BBP did a few years ago, and we are currently working on a research program that aims to implement risks related to the environment. I mean, water networks, infrastructure, presence of biodiversity at the environmental of a building. So this will be presented during the coming COP26 in Glasgow. Well, I could next please. Okay, sorry. Before my slide didn't appear. Okay, well, I could speak a lot about all the tools we provide and our main conclusion, but just to let you know that we will launch new e-learning courses focusing on adaptation of building to climate change the 9th of November this year. It will be translated in French, English. It is free. And at the same time, by the end of the year, we will implement our mapping tool, free mapping tool, to the European localization. That's it. So thank you everybody for listening me, and I'm available for questions.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. That was a very interesting presentation, definitely, and I appreciate getting to hear about a lot of these different solutions and the recommendations you proposed at the end as well. I just want to pull up. So everyone, please feel free to write in any questions that you have for Lois. So in terms of what you discussed and the Build Upon Squared framework, which sources of data can cities use if they want to assess the resilience of the building stock and the impact of renovation on this?
Which kind of data will we use to have a better knowledge on hazards?
Yes, yeah, which sources in particular?
Actually, this is a real issue because some countries have their own database and some others only have the IPCC database. Mm-hmm. So until now, for the French geography, French market, we use the academic database from Météo France and from a French portal that is called GeoRisc. So we use this data and we transform it into data that can be understandable by the players. This is for the French market, but since now we are going to extend the application of this mapping tool to the European market, we will use the data from IPCC and see how we can mix it with national data when it exists. That's it. But at the end, IPCC data, most national IPCC data come from national data, so it should be relevant to mix it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, thank you. That's very useful. And another question I had is, in one of your recommendations, you had engaged with policymakers on the city level resilience strategies and with the insurance industry. So regarding that, one of the things that we did look at for the Build Upon Squared project was the consultation projects, the consultation requirements that are needed for the long-term renovation strategies. So have you, through your work, sort of been involved in any of those engagement and stakeholder engagement conversations with policymakers?
Yes. I think we have been involved as anyone to the setting up of the taxonomy criteria, for sure, that are still in discussion for next objectives. And at the French level, we are strongly involved in the way of implementing a climate risk approach, which is the first step of the strategy. I mean, since 2015 in France, you have to do a climate risk mapping if you are an investor, a real estate investor, or any investors. So, the real estate players have a physical. Is very particular. I mean, so we have been providing this tool in order the institutional maker could seize it and could improve their knowledge on what is important on real estate sectors. Don't know if I...
No, that's very helpful. Thank you. And I think we're seeing more and more how important the risk assessment of buildings and on a more city level, how important it is, especially given the recent floods that were experienced in lots of parts of Europe. So I think this is very useful and it was very interesting to hear about. So thank you. So for now, we will move on to Blanca Kovac-Waletis to hear actually from one of our pilot cities. So I will hand over the virtual microphone to you.
Okay. Let me see. Can everybody see the screen? Hello?
Not yet.
No?
No.
I shared it. Let me see now what's going on.
If it doesn't work, you can email me your presentation and I can.
Okay, let's see. I'll try again. Okay. I did it earlier, but
now we can see it.
Okay. Well, first of all, I would like to thank both of the colleagues before me on the great presentations. When I look at them, you know, it's like a little city from Croatia sounds, you know, on the first stage of trying to do everything regarding the current issues. But okay. I'm just gonna say a few words about our city. It is the 6th largest city in Croatia. And let me just, how can I move the presentations? Okay, here we go. It has like 57 smaller settlements in the area. One larger settlement, which is city of Velika Gorica, which is situated right next to the capital of Zagreb. The population majority is middle-aged or older, and those surrounding settlements, which actually gets us to the problem of getting them transferred to new energy sources. Like I said, that provide us with a bigger problem because most of the younger population is living the settlements, and the rest of them are technological, like medium illiterate, so they don't want to change their sources or they're interested in it. So the problem lies mostly in that area. We have a lot of visions and opportunities are kind of harder to grasp. City has a clear vision on a future direction towards improving air quality and preserving drinking water. Area lies on a large amount of groundwater as well as water wells for the city of Velika Gorica and surrounding areas. Many good projects are aimed at achieving a decarbonization agenda. However, we have a big problem with lack of data for quality decision making and lack of financial resources for the implementation of projects mentioned. So the city is a signatory to the Covenant of Mayors for Climate Energy, among other things, had adopted all the necessary documents to achieve the goals of the Covenant of Mayors, as well as legislation aimed at the decarbonization and clean air. At the same time, we have a clear vision aimed at increasing air quality. But we also had a natural disaster that caused by large-scale earthquakes that kind of got an additional need to collect data, needed to prepare for the project as the data at hand kind of collapsed. Quick overview on the earthquake and renovation issue at hand. We had a lot of apartment buildings, a lot of houses are damaged, including the buildings and city ownership. We had a lot of issues with schools that are inspected. They're pretty much all good now, except we have a few sports halls that are temporarily unusable. Minor damage are found in cultural institutions, except for the castle in a nearby area, which is temporarily unusable. Damage on most sacral buildings are present, but only 6 chapels are not usable at the time. So gathering data as the biggest problem at hand right now for us. So data on energy sources used by a household needed in determination of area's greatest needs for renewable energy sources. City is providing co-financing to change the energy that is used in households, and pretty eager in informing citizens about co-financing calls from regional, national bodies. Also needed in data system the information on wells, underground water used by the citizens of Velika Gorica and Zagreb, by recording the conditions of the lakes and finally obtaining data on them. We could move towards the phase of remediation and putting those lakes to use for citizens, some of which are intended by urban plans. I mean, the GIS platform, it is on a high level of readiness, but obviously we are missing or not having relevant data to enter in it. It is primarily intended for administration use for the city projects, so they can be used for furthering to actually get the project on hand going and grasp the opportunities at hand. Actions directed towards the vision of the city of clean air is actions directed towards the vision as a city of clean air, which is protecting the environment for future generations. The city has adopted strategic documents such as air protection program, energy efficiency program, SECUP, and others, all aimed at the same goal. City strategic energy efficiency implementation. So currently we're doing a pilot area for the implementation of EU CF projects that will include 3 settlements in the immediate vicinity. Trying to find financially acceptable mechanisms, innovating business modules, organizational forms through detailed expert analysis. Measures will be planned, implemented to increase the energy efficiency of the settlements and reduce the difference in user performance, and promote NZEB construction standards, renovations, promotion and application of innovative building solutions. Available natural potential and is what we're trying to do, and enable long-term financial sustainability of planned installations. These are just some of the buildings that got renovated in the recent past. City has been significantly intensified in the process of energy renovation of public buildings, and also city housing is doing the same, considering the private buildings in the area. So recently we renovated a kindergarten here close by, actually 2 of them, elementary schools, and also we have a few buildings in our ownership that we're trying to actually renovate, but during the earthquake they also got pretty damaged. So now we're dealing with the Ministry of Culture as well, because we're trying to preserve the building as the way it was. A lot of documentation is already prepared for renovation of other elementary schools, kindergartens, but it's all waiting on public tenders at the moment, because financing is really one of the biggest issue over here. So a lot of things are prepared, but we are just waiting on the right financing to go and get started with that. City housing also, they renovated 22 apartment buildings, and they're also waiting for 36 of them with the documentations to get the right tenders to get going with that. City itself, it wants to show its commitment to sustainable development by its own example, with the construction of the swimming pool and nearby. City installed collectors for water heating. The static of the kindergarten roof is analyzed to set up the roof and PVs. It's a part of a solar mapping of Velika Gorica, and through the application of Velika Gorica, solar mapping was presented, which shows the potential of using a power plant on the roofs of apartment buildings in Velika Gorica, which is also depends on the people that live there. So it is suggestion-based type of thing. City analyzes the potential facilities as elementary school nearby, proved most adequate for the installation of first solar power plant last year, co-financed with the Environmental Protection and Energy and Efficiency Fund. And of course, wanting to continue the trend of using roofs on public buildings, projects were made for the construction of solar power plant in elementary school, in subsidiary school here nearby, Bushevets. City ecosystem actors, city administration, of course. We have a HEP heating utility company, financial institution, ASCOs, city council, citizen, and science and research institutions. So that would be all from me. Kind of new at this, so I hope I was clear. And I was here on behalf of Gordana Karnaya, which actually is working on this project for the city of Velika Gorica. Thank you.
Thank you, Blanca, very much for that. And I appreciate your stepping in to present last moment. So it was great to have your insights on this. So one thing I wanted to ask you is, during renovation, do you think it's important, or do you think that there's a business case to be looking at energy efficiency measures and seismic resiliency measures at the same time? And do you think that in looking at one of those things, it's important or possible to be pushing for renovation and actions to be happening on both sides, especially for from a business point of view?
Well, of course, it needs to be looked at both sides. We do actually have a level of building safety according to that, but most of these buildings that did get ruined are quite older, but they were not renovated, obviously after the law that required them to make it to that level. So the biggest problem actually we have with the Ministry of Culture, because as we heard, for example, in Germany, when you have an older building like that is trying to stay preserved, they do tear it down and they renovate it, according to the way it looked. But our ministry currently is requiring us to try and build it up as much as we can to preserve the way it was. So that's what we're actually, one of the biggest problem we're facing at the moment. So just extra financing is what we're waiting for. So
perfect. Yeah. That makes sense.
But yes.
Well, great. Thank you. Thank you again. And with the last 3 minutes that we have left, we got a question in the chat box from Stephen, which was a great question. So for Anders and Lois in particular, do you think cities are doing enough to tackle resilience of buildings for climate change? And are they taking it seriously enough? So Anders, we slightly touched on this at the beginning of the session before while we were waiting for people to join. So maybe we'll start with you. And we've got 2 minutes left, so I encourage both of you to keep your answers short.
Well, as traveling have been zero lately, I mean, I can only relate to what I see in my home country. And I see, my impression is it's reactive panic mode. We get rainfall now that floods cities and roads, etc. So they panic. They build a wall around a small village in the very south of Sweden because they expect the sea rise to move up, significantly the coming decades, etc. So, but I think this whole thing about a city thinking as an entity for working for climate resilience is quite a new thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite recent. So I don't think we should criticize. We need to realize that it's a new thing, but it's probably here to stay. So it needs to develop.
Yes. Yeah. And Lois, how about you?
I have the same understanding of Anders. Me, I say that we could criticize because Rio conference was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So we could criticize, but not only cities. At the end, big cities which have much more resources are setting plans to adapt to climate change, and small and medium cities that have much less resources have difficulties to follow. So I think the point now is to see how we can create places where medium and small city could provide from what big cities did. I'm speaking about Paris, for instance. But at the end, even if everything is positive, because things are moving on faster and faster, I think we're a bit delayed. We are still too much reactive and not enough active.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you all. And we still have some comments coming in, but unfortunately we have to go back to the main stage to have a bit of a wrap-up session from all of the breakouts. But thank you to our three presenters. It was really excellent to hear from all of you.